Survey, show of hands, how many people use Office 365 right now? Awesome, that's a good number. How many planning to use in the next 6 months? All right. So pretty much the whole room is using Office 365 or planning to use Office 365 in some shape or form, right? So, I mean, we've been in this place where, all our servers used to be on-premises, private cloud, big Exchange servers, huge NetBIOS filers. I used to love those NetBIOS filers, Samba clients connecting from Linux machines to them. It was all great. I mean, never worked, but it was all great. Then the small revolution came in. Things started moving towards public cloud. Azure services, rack spaces, and Terramarks, all of those came in. And then slowly we all decided, you know what, let's move to SaaS. I mean, there's definitely a lot of value to SaaS. Obviously, there are other applications like Salesforce. I mean, I remember those ads. I can tell you my age here. No software. That was Salesforce's big thing. And everyone started moving to Salesforce because the Siebel at on-premises never worked. And Oracle bought it and made it even worse after that. But then Microsoft started this whole thing about moving people from Exchange services on-premises and then move them to Office 365. And that definitely helped their case too. I mean, if you look at their numbers last year, which came out, the growth of Office 365, I mean, tremendous growth, 70% increase in a year. And I mean, new CEO, obviously, if you can recognize this picture. I had an old picture of Steve Ballmer, but you know what? Let's go with the new one now. Office is a big driver for Microsoft. It accounts for a lot of revenues for them, a big portion of the revenues. And then the third thing, right? I mean, they actually were able to go back and take the market share which they lost to Google Apps and take it back from Google Apps because of the things they did. They made things easier. I mean, can you imagine like Microsoft actually supporting an iPad client like 5 years ago? Or even supporting Linux on Azure. I mean, these are the, actually, I saw a t-shirt someone was wearing here. Microsoft loves Linux. You could never imagine that, Microsoft doing that. But that's what Microsoft is going through. It's going through a complete revolution within the company. It's great for every one of us. It's improving our productivity. And that's what they do. I mean, that's what they've been doing for many, many years now, many decades now. But when we talk about Office 365, I mean, it's tough to explain. For me, it's very tough to explain it to someone saying that, what exactly is Office 365? Well, there's a big portion of Office 365, which is your Office client. This is your Word, PowerPoint. I don't know the S over there. I think it's Sway or something, and then Excel, and then OneNote, all those things. So those are the software services, which are all bundled as part of your Office 365 bundle, the license bundle you have. It's a big brand name and a license bundle. That's what it is. And then you have software services, which are things like SharePoint, OneDrive, Exchange. All these are bundled, again, as a service as part of Office 365. You have IM clients, IM services, instant messaging services. It used to be Link everywhere. Now it's Skype for Business. There's still Yammer. They're going through some consolidation there. There's a lot of stuff on that side. So Office 365, again, I mean, just to summarize, is a big brand which Microsoft ships. It's not a specific app. And that's actually pretty useful slide to talk about because there are parts of it which you can secure, which require security, and there are parts which don't. Where is the biggest place where you put all the files and where it stays? It's the file sharing apps. Every place else, there is no storage. There is no real malware which actually sits there. There's no malware which goes out. It's the file sharing apps where everything sits, where everything propagates, and where every problem happens. Similarly, data exposure problems, they all happen where data stays, which is, again, SharePoint, OneDrive, and Yammer. There is some confusion in the market about what exactly constitutes SharePoint, what exactly constitutes OneDrive. If I log into SharePoint, my URL is sharepoint.com. If I log into OneDrive, my URL is sharepoint.com. There's a small my which gets attached to it. But then again, I mean, the thing is that it's one big platform which Microsoft provides for file storing. And then you can put all your files there. You can collaborate very, very easily over there. It also opens up a lot of problems there too, because you have security challenges, how to secure where the files are getting stored, where these files are getting propagated, who's downloading them, who has access to these files. So we polled a bunch. So ESG Research is a company which does surveys for not Steve Harvey, ESG Research. They do surveys. We polled over 300 companies, different verticals, and most CISOs and directors of securities. They responded back, and the response was very much in line of what we were thinking. What were the top apps we actually were worried about? So they said, obviously, Office 365, OneDrive, Dropbox was the second big app. Dropbox is slightly tricky because when they talk about Dropbox, when we all talk about Dropbox, Dropbox is a very consumer app. I've barely seen, I mean, they released like Dropbox for Business, I think, pretty recently. There is some adoption for Dropbox for Business, but as an IT person, my biggest worry is the unsanctioned usage of Dropbox, and we're going to talk a little bit about that too. And then number 3, there is Google Drive. People are concerned about Office 365. That doesn't mean that there is inherently something really wrong with Office 365 or HipChat is better than Office 365. I grew up in socialist India. I mean, India was very socialist back when I was growing up. There was a big board in front of this shipping company. It used to say, if you work more, you will make more mistakes. If you work less, you will make less mistakes. Office 365 is there probably because more people use Office 365. And HipChat is down there because there's a less market for HipChat there. Not because Office 365 has a problem or anything like that. And then we asked them, what are the areas where you are most concerned about? If there is any specific place, I mean, are there certain types of apps? Number 1 was file sharing. And guess what? When we did some analysis of the wildfire data on how malware spreads, what are the biggest vehicle for malware spreading and all of that? It was file sharing applications. It used to be NetBIOS file shares, the NFS file shares and all of that. Now it is all moving to SaaS-based file sharing applications, the OneDrives, the Google Drives, the Dropbox and Box and all these things. Second, of course, is email, and the third big concern is CRM applications. CRM applications are actually very, very interesting because the nature of CRM applications, you're always sharing with those applications. You're sharing with your customers, you're sharing with your partners, vendors, manufacturing companies, everyone who's sharing data with them. So obviously, the idea is that you're going to share data with it, but of course, you need to make sure that you're sharing that data in a safe way and you're not sharing things which you're not supposed to share. So obviously, we have a product here at Palo Alto which does a lot about SaaS security. We spoke to our customers who were trying to deploy OneDrive and SharePoint about, hey, so file sharing apps, what kind of problems you have, what are you worried about? So biggest thing is they have customer data there. They have lots and lots of customer data which they are liable for. PCI data which they collect. PI data for the employees. I mean, all our HR department, they take employees' social security numbers, they take their phone numbers, records, 401k contributions, they all put them on OneDrive. It's supposed to be encrypted. It is supposed not to be shared with any person, but you never know who has access to them. We had instances where a company's auditing company, which was auditing some other company, one of the auditors shared with their personal email ID. So it actually breaks a complete legal agreement between the two companies because this guy is now sharing bookings information before they even release it to SEC, and that person is sharing with his personal Gmail ID, so who knows what kind of data is getting leaked out from there. There are movies there. And if you haven't noticed, I mean, OneDrive has some soft limits on how much data you can put in. It's a terabyte per user. They've been going back and forth about that limits also. But if you cross those limits, you might incur some extra charges. Also, terabytes of movies. I mean, if you have movies, pirated movies, the problem is that they might be pirated in many cases. And you might have some problems with MPA and other companies too. By the way, Rene's favorite movie is not Star Wars, it's Downton Abbey. That's what he likes. How do we know it? Because we monitor everything through our Aperture system and see what kind of movies he's storing, and Downton Abbey is what he loves. There is also a chance of source code getting put on those applications. There is absolutely no reason any proprietary source code should ever exist on a file sharing application. Source code, whether you're a technical company, whether you're in high tech, whether in a retail, you're maintaining a website, whether it is your application code or anything, there is absolutely no reason it should ever belong in a file sharing application. And every time in our experience, we run into source code. And it's like, why does it even belong there? But somehow it gets there. And then the favorite one, everyone we talk about in Palo Alto a lot about is malware. All these file sharing applications, SharePoints, everything have mobile clients now. They have sync clients. They make the job of syncing very easily. And they make the job of spreading malware very easily too. So these are the problems. I mean, we kind of spoke to our customers about. They also kind of echoed the same concerns we had. And that's what we found so far. So when you have a problem, the necessity leads to invention. I mean, all that kind of stuff. Lots of solutions are available in the market. Lots of startups came on board in the last couple of years. Different approaches towards solving these problems. The first and foremost is, let's use this proxy technology. We developed it 15, 20 years ago. Let's reuse it in a different way now. My first job out of school was actually a reverse proxy. I used to work on a reverse proxy product. It was a great product as a reverse proxy, but it's not really a security product. I mean, it had its challenges there. JavaScript parsing through reverse proxies is a major mess. If you have an app which uses AJAX, guess what? Outlook Web Access uses AJAX all along now. If it is dynamic XML kind of content, reverse proxies cannot parse all that kind of content. They fail in parsing contents. And the other problem they add is the more JavaScript and HTML you have, they slow down the processing even more. They add much more latencies. Another thing you are doing is that you're taking the traffic from your endpoints, from your users, and then sending it to some other person's proxy, and then sending back to the Microsoft cloud. So let's pick Microsoft. In Bay Area, they have around 20 data centers, small data centers everywhere just in the Bay Area. And if you go with a company which has like one reverse proxy for the entire West Coast maybe, you're probably just slowing down your user experience by a lot. And most likely users, what they would do is they'll go and open Google Drive and then start putting files on Google Drive. That's what users do. I mean, they'll find the next best thing and they'll just start moving things around, finding workarounds to your problem you've created for them. For proxies, we've all have some experience with them. We have dealt with them. They have their challenges. You need to insert pack files into the endpoints. Mobile devices, it's a pain to manage them. It's just not a very scalable model to work with for proxies. Then, of course, the next best thing is installing VPN agents. I mean, let's call them something new now. Let's call them app VPN, whatever it is. It's a VPN client at the end of the day. And take all that traffic, pass it through our data center, and then now let's see what kind of traffic is going on back and forth through these applications. None of those things works. So the latest one, if you have seen the evolution of SaaS presentation, we talk a lot about API-based approaches over there too. This is a big investment for the SaaS companies itself, not for us, but for SaaS companies. They realize that one of the biggest challenges they have for the adoption of SaaS applications is security around SaaS applications. And they're working very closely with us and vendors like us to develop these APIs better, make the APIs better, and then, at the end of the day, sell more licenses for Microsoft Office 365. That's what really matters for them. So the API solutions, the way it works, and we have a solution here. I'm not going to get into how our solution works, but overall the market, the way API solutions work is they all go and attach using an API endpoint to the application where the data itself is stored. Now, the way they work is they go in and get a list of all the users, and it goes and looks at every single user's content, sees what kind of files they have stored, downloads those files, and then goes and runs an inspection engine against it. It could be a DLP inspection. It could be some sort of wildfire kind of capability, depending upon the company they have. And then it also looks at the composite risk of the content and who it is being shared with. So who is accessing the data? If it is a PCI file, if it is some sort of merger and acquisition document, it's completely fine as long as it is being shared within a small set of people who are under the confidential agreement, who are supposed to access the document. The problem is if you have that file being shared with someone who you do not trust, someone's personal email ID, things like that, that's when it gets into trouble. That's when you don't know whether the data is getting controlled there. So this is actually a great trend we are seeing is in the past, some financial groups within companies, they used to use emails to send spreadsheets saying that these are our quarterly booking numbers. Now what they're saying is we don't want to use email anymore because that's probably more insecure. We're going to just put it on a file sharing application like OneDrive and then just open it up for like 5 or 6 people. And that I can monitor it using a solution. The emails, I don't know. If someone forwards it to someone, I have no idea where it's going. But on the file sharing application itself, I can easily monitor using a solution like a CASB and then control where the data is going to. Then in our case, we also have some machine learning based techniques where you can actually train the model. You can say that, look for financial documents, look for legal documents, and then if it is a legal document being shared with a person from engineering, it's like, that doesn't add up very well. So you can say that, let me remove that person's access from this legal document. And then, of course, finally, malware. There are, of course, we Aperture here, we integrate with Wildfire. Any file which gets submitted onto OneDrive, we go in and then we inspect against the Wildfire. If it is a known malware, if it is unknown, it goes through the whole dynamic analysis, and then the word it comes back, and you can easily secure the file, and you can secure your OneDrive. So in order to enable Office 365 safely, we think that there are three things you need to do. You need to first control access. And controlling access comes in two different varieties. Of course, you have a lot of single sign-on providers. There are some really cool ones, the Oktas and the Pings, and I'm not even naming the old school ones, the RSS and Oracles. Everyone has a great single sign-on solution. And we are completely oblivious. All these API solutions are oblivious to those single sign-on solutions. The way they work is, since they work from the back end, they hook into the application itself. There is no reason to even worry about how the single sign-on works. Whether they're using one-factor, two-factor, or they just use password as their password, it doesn't really matter. The next thing you want to see is that who has access to that data. Whether it is your own employees, what group do they belong to, whether they are your external collaborators. Are these external collaborators really trusted external collaborators? Are these vendors who are supposed to access your data? Are they under NDA? If they are under NDA, can I tag them as NDA partners and make sure that these only NDA partners have access to those kinds of documents out in our network. The next thing is about data governance, some sort of discovery where you can do some discovery about the data itself. Make sure that the data doesn't have any PII content. If it has some personally identifiable content, are we encrypting it? If it does not have anything, only then you can say that it can go on to the drive without encryption, and then you can say that you can actually share it with anyone you want. And then finally, you should have some technique of managing advanced threats. Make sure that there are no malwares which are going back and forth through these SaaS applications. Does that make sense so far? So all this is great as long as the application is under your control. You can give a solution like a CASB to go and scan it. You have admin privileges to say that I'm going to allow these applications to go forth. This is your enterprise-owned SaaS application. You need to gain complete visibility into that. What about the SaaS has a different problem too. The whole unsanctioned usage of SaaS applications. This is where people are bringing in their own apps. Even with Microsoft, there is the whole Outlook free version of it. You have the live accounts, people are using it. And it's very easy to take a file from your corporate OneDrive and then share it with your personal OneDrive. How do you want to stop that? There is a big problem with that. You can lose, of course, corporate IP. You can also spread malware from your personal stuff to your corporate stuff, corporate installation. And then you can always, with companies which are under compliance violations, it can definitely break the compliance rules, regulations if your company is under those kind of problems. They deal with those kind of issues. So we have some survey data about it. How many companies really are concerned about shadow IT applications? So I say around 80%, if my math is right, said that we are really, it says valley out there, huh? Interesting. Let's go by the pie charts then. There's a conversion from the spreadsheet. So going by the size of the pies, we can see that most people know that there are some kind of SaaS usage in their company, and they are concerned about it, whether it is low or moderate to high, but it is a big concern. Of course, there's a small pie who are like, don't know, don't care. I don't have any financial data. We don't store anything. So you can always have people who are like, yeah, we are a very open company. We don't let anyone copy our stuff and reuse it any which way. There's actually a very nice comment made during one of the Aperture sessions yesterday. The person said, in my age, we used to call it misappropriation and misconduct when people used to steal data. And in this age now, we call it BYOA, bring your own app. Yeah, that kind of makes sense. We are actually becoming kind of like numb to this whole fact that shadow IT is a problem and people are using whatever they want and they're copying it. But that is something which we all need to get a handle on. We need to control that. We need to get some idea about what's happening there. So Office 365 specifically, the key thing is you need to have some visibility into what's happening with these SaaS applications, how much traffic is going to the applications, whether it is something some specific users are doing, whether the users are doing because they don't know that they have actually an enterprise application, or whether they're doing it because they are trying to be malicious over there. I'll give you a good example. In one of the companies, we have a report called the SLR report, which can give you some visibility into your network, what kind of applications are going in your network. They have a corporate OneDrive, and for some reason, I mean, and again, in a month, they were sent like around 5 terabytes of data to their corporate OneDrive, and Google Drive, people were still using it, and it was around 2 terabytes of traffic was going to Google Drive. The CISO looks at it and he's like, why are people still using Google Drive? And then, one of the people in the audience, he says, do we have Google Drive? Or do we have OneDrive? So there is a big education problem too. People don't know what is their sanctioned application for the company. When the sanctioned application is purchased, people don't have any training on what you can share, what you cannot share. It's pretty much, we have a new Office 365 policy in the company. Let's just move to Office 365. That's it, nothing after that. So new accounts, login, that's pretty much it. We don't really worry about what kind of sharing happens in there. Anyone in the room, raise of hands, know how the hierarchical permissions in Office 365 works? Anyone? One person. Office 365 is actually, and I don't want to pick on Office 365, it's actually all file sharing applications. They all have these hierarchical permission settings. The way it works is if I create a folder and say make it like publicly available and send a link out to all 300 of you, and then Nishant has this like really cool idea. He's like, let's do this in our next release. This is the coolest thing which Palo Alto Networks can do. And he uploads to that file. He has no idea that I was sharing with all 300 of you. So what happens? As soon as he uploads files, you will get a notification. Hey, one of the collaborators has uploaded his next functional spec for Palo Alto Networks' next release. You want to take a look at that? Yeah, sure, let's take a look at that. So the way it works is whatever the parent folder has permissions and whoever has permission to the parent folder, they have access pretty much to everything underneath that folder. Unless someone goes and explicitly and changes all these permissions and they understand what these permissions are, and then that's a good, nice research project we can all work on. SharePoint has similar problems too. I mean, you can share a site with someone, and you can create documents within the site. You can say that I'm going to allow it within my team, but then you can also say that I'm going to allow it with a few contractors. I put a few files. All the contractors get access to that same file which my team had access to, the same website which the team had access to. So the first thing you need to know is what kind of data is going to these applications. Decryption. We always talk about decryption. It's probably the most important thing you need to do if you want to get some visibility into your applications. Yes, it has its challenges and all of that. We work very closely with the vendors to improve decryption and bring you more visibility into the applications itself. Once you have some level of visibility into what's happening with your SaaS application, you want to go in and put some granular enforcement policies around them. Prevent the data exposure, data exfiltration from your network. And then finally, I mean, on the application itself, go in, use a solution like API, prevent the exposure of data itself. 365 visibility, I mean, this is very key in order to gain control over the application itself. I'll give you an example on what we did with Palo Alto, right? Last year, if you guys remember, if you have used Office and Office 365 specifically, we used to have a couple of signatures for Microsoft Office 365. Now there are close to 14 signatures, and this is this is a great use case where we were able to convince the application vendor, saying that this is actually a big problem for our joint customers. So let's work something together and figure out the problem. And we were able to develop app IDs where you can even individually identify the flows, and you can look at what files are getting uploaded, what files are getting transferred, what kind of threads are within the files, within the flows itself. And we can do all that inspection just because of the enhancements we were able to make thanks to Microsoft itself. Again, decryption, I keep going back to decryption. There are applications which are tough to decrypt. Dropbox is actually a great example of that because they use SSL pinning, they use client-side authentication. It makes it very, very tough to go and look at what kind of data is going within. My recommendation is block it. Why are people even using Dropbox if we have a corporate OneDrive? I have complete visibility into OneDrive, but I have zero visibility into Dropbox, and you're saying that I need to use Dropbox for work from my work laptop? It's completely hard for anyone to comprehend why is unsanctioned usage of application completely okay, but why can't I bring a USB stick with some malware and I can put in whichever laptop I like to do that? It's, again, I mean, something we need to realize. We need to take a stance as a security person and then enforce those policies there. And to finally, I mean, summarize this whole thing, right? Protecting Microsoft is not a, it's not like a one silver bullet which will protect all things from Microsoft. Microsoft has many, many solutions. Microsoft solutions have many, many pieces to it. It starts with the endpoint. You need to protect the endpoint. You need to have something which can detect problems, exploits on the endpoint itself. You need to have visibility into the traffic which is going between the endpoints and the applications, between the users and the applications. Protect those endpoints as well as the user traffic. Then finally, if there is a cloud version of your infrastructure going to Azure, bringing that visibility into that traffic which is going between the user and the application. Protect your Azure services. There are lots of solutions. Of course, Palo Alto supports VM series for Azure. There are other solutions available which will help you protect Microsoft Azure too. And then finally, Office 365. See what kind of traffic is going through up to your Office 365. Make sure that it is, if you are not using Microsoft Link, you can block Microsoft Link. If you are using SharePoint Online, let people go to SharePoint Online. And then finally, if you still have your BYOD, BYOA, BYOL kind of any BY policies, have a solution which can look at the data source itself, a thing which can leverage the APIs, which can connect to the back end of the application and get the exposures, get the problems at the source itself rather than looking at inside the network. So it goes back to the triangle, right? Endpoint, cloud, and the network. Tie in your security at all three places so you can get comprehensive coverage for security rather than doing a pinpoint solution and hope that something best will happen from there. Any questions? It's all good?
Can Global Protect deploy on their internal networks help with the decryption problem?
So the question here was, can Global Protect help with the decryption problem? So Global Protect on the internal network. So Global Protect is, I mean, if you think about it, right? I mean, it doesn't really do anything. That's not where the decryption really happens. The decryption happens on the firewall itself, on the next generation firewall. So in order for someone to get decryption, Global Protect will bring that traffic into the firewall, and the firewall has to decrypt the traffic there. So long answer, maybe it's not going to work if the firewall cannot decrypt the traffic itself.
So with Office 365 and decryption, they suggest do not have decryption turned on because it causes problems with their product set. How are you guys working with them to work around those work around those problems?
Right. So it's actually a multi-pronged solution. So there are certain operating systems, the Surface hardware especially, where we have big challenges with the decryption. Then the next thing is about the cert pinning, which they do. There are some ideas floated around how we can actually push the certificate from a central location to all the endpoints, where you can pretty much. So the idea there was when cert pinning came about, right? It's that you don't want a man-in-the-middle attack, and let's have the endpoint trust only a few certain clients certificates out there. So cert pinning, if we can push a root certificate, a known root certificate, enterprise root certificate to the endpoints, then we will be able to decrypt most of the traffic, and it will not break all the blessed application from Microsoft itself. And the third thing, which was a big thing, was they added some extra identifiers specifically for the smaller apps like the Link, the SharePoints, and all of that. They added that, and we were able to pick them up, and we were able to look at that in order to do much more identification of the application itself. So it helped a few parts of decryption. It didn't help the entire decryption problem. So there is actually a document on support. It's a pretty comprehensive topic. It's a matrix of things. So there are certain clients. It's not that decryption doesn't work across the board. So it's the Surface tablets which have a problem, and then the Link client which has a problem. Apart from that, decryption works everywhere. It doesn't break in most of the cases. Of course, browsers and decryption works with Microsoft Office 365 without any flaws now. It has come a long way from where it used to be like 6 months ago to just now.
Never mind.
Yep.
Never mind. White.
Nope.
You said the Link client, and what was the other client?
The Surface tablets, Microsoft hardware. There's a question. You can say, I can repeat that.
You mentioned the blocking of Dropbox, or something recommended. I don't think we disagree with that, but I noticed that lots of vendors out there are saying like, oh yes, use Dropbox to upload your tech support documents, and then vice versa. Like there might be downloads out there people want to get. So obviously it is a really hard problem to address. Is there like an alternative that you guys have figured out is better, that you're able to get users to adapt to, or?
So that's where the partnerships come in a lot. We are, as I said, with all the SaaS vendors. Dropbox is one of the supported SaaS applications from Aperture. So we have a very good relation with Dropbox. I can't say much right now because we are under NDA, what we are doing with Dropbox. But of course, that business relation will help us eventually to get to the level of decryption which we have with other applications. Yep.
Explain a little bit more about the interaction of the Palo Alto Gateway with the Office 365 because how you communicate with this that will be in line with data, the configuration or the API.
Okay. So the question was, can you elaborate a little bit about how the interaction between Office 365 and Office and the Palo Alto Gateway works? I want to clarify a little bit. When you said Palo Alto Gateway, do you mean something specific about Aperture? Because you also mentioned API. So both. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about Aperture, how it works first, and then I'll get to the firewall itself. So the way Aperture works is if you are a customer, Bob's Garage. So Bob's Garage is the big conglomerate, and then they have their own Office 365 deployment. So what happens is you get a tenant on Aperture. Now this particular piece of tenant, there is a client portion to it, which goes and talks to the server portion of the API endpoint on Office 365. And these are published API endpoints. Anyone who knows how to parse that data, they can all subscribe to it. So we go in and connect to that API endpoint. We have an app which is authorized to go and connect to that API endpoint. It goes through a certification process from Microsoft, and they say that this is a trusted vendor who can go in and pull in data for one of my customers, which is like Microsoft customers. So in order for that to happen, what you need to do is you need to go in, again, specifically authorize Microsoft to say that, Microsoft, I'm letting Palo Alto Networks inspect my data. And this is all done through a very simple to use interface. It sounds fairly complicated, but I mean, it's like 5 clicks of buttons, and you're like up and the connection happens. OAuth is the authorization process which Microsoft uses to authorize applications like Aperture to go in and inspect the data. You give Aperture a set of permissions saying that Aperture can read specific data, they can read user information, they can read users' content. If you want to take some actions, you need to say that Aperture can also go and modify permissions. It can do a bunch of things too. So it's both read and write permissions it will ask for. And once you say, yes, I'm going to allow Aperture to go and scan my data, you hit a scan button. And then what happens is, first thing we do is we go in and get a list of all users. So every single user who is in the company, we get a list of those users. And then it goes through a parsing saying that, user 1, give me all the file metadata for it. And when the file metadata comes in, it looks at what kind of files they are. There are certain things you can skip. If there is a big OVA file, which is like 2 gigabytes of file, and you know it's an OVA file, we've determined it. Do you want to do some PCI inspection against it, there's no point in looking at PCI on an OVA file. If it is a big movie file, do you want to run like legal document classification against it? Most likely not, right? So depending upon the file type, if it is a Word document or if it is a PDF file, that file is brought down to the Aperture installation. We convert that file into a text file, run the DLP inspection. Somewhere in the middle, we look for the file type. We also submit that to Wildfire. Wildfire sends a verdict saying that it is a malicious content, yes, no, all of that depending upon if it's a known one, if it's an unknown one. Then that file, what we do is we destroy that file. The VM doesn't keep that file anymore. There's no customer data which is stored. Some metadata around that file is stored. So it has the file name, the username, who has access to files, all the list of the collaborators. So if you're sharing with your if you're sharing with your wife's email ID, they say that this particular plans are being shared with Bob's wife. And if you want to remove Bob's wife from the corporate secret plans, then you can just say remove. There should be no one outside this particular team who has access to those files. You can just remove those files from there. You can also see a list of all the partners you are sharing data with, one click of a button. So the way it works is once we get the list of users, the data, who the data is being shared with, we will correlate some of that stuff. So if user@gmail.com is showing up everywhere, we say that this particular user has access to this 5,000 files out there. That helps a lot because then what you can say is, show me all the users who are accessing via a Gmail ID. And you can see a list of all those users. Show me all the files this particular Sniper Cat has access to. And then Sniper Cat, of course, has access to all these financial documents. So you can say that, let me remove Sniper Cat off my network and add him to an untrusted user so he'll never come on the network again. So that's how pretty much Aperture works. The NGFW, it can identify that there is a flow going to Office 365. It's mostly to, it has some visibility into also what kind of data is being shared. The data filtering profiles help there. Doesn't have the same amount of DLP capabilities which Aperture has, of course, but it can look a lot within the stream itself. If there is a known string, it can say that I'm seeing Palo Alto Networks confidential, so let me take an action on that, like block it, alert it. You can put file blocking profiles on the firewall, and you can block specific type of files, you can block specific files, and then you can get some level of control with the firewall itself. There was a question back.
With Adelom being purchased by Microsoft, how is that going to impact Aperture? And I understand Adelom is going to be part of the SA that comes with Microsoft.
Right. So we had many discussions with both the Microsoft team. Actually, the Microsoft gentleman was here a minute ago, and with the Adelom team. There are a lot of places where there are some overlaps, but then again, I mean, there are lots of complementary solutions too. Just because you have an antivirus enabled from Microsoft doesn't mean that you don't want to install another antivirus. It's the same analogy here too. Adelom has some capabilities, DLP capabilities. We have a lot more DLP capabilities within exfiltration. So there is still some areas where we need to figure out where we can actually do some partnerships with Adelom too, specifically with Microsoft Office 365, and see how that whole partnership, how Adelom falls into Office 365, how the new version of O365 is going to even look like.
That hasn't been determined yet.
Microsoft has not determined that yet. We will figure it out once Microsoft figures it out. Question.
Mega, you mentioned the whitelist, blacklist just in your last answer. Where is that applied? Is that on OneDrive or Office 365, or is that part of Aperture?
So the whitelist and blacklist of users is applied on Aperture. OneDrive has some DLP capabilities, but not a lot of collaborator management and all those kind of stuff. That's mostly done in Aperture itself. Any more? All right, thanks everyone. Thanks for being here.